Hey guys, Joe J. Rut Studios here. I'm going to show you how I made this little planter stand out of some scrap material in the shop. Stay tuned, check it out. Alright, so the first thing you want to do is determine your circle size. I have a bunch of 13 and 14 inch offcut boards from my assembly table, and I want to make a 12-inch circle, so I'm all set there. Next thing you want to do is determine your grain pattern. Not going to be too picky here, as a planter is going to sit on top of it, but I want it to look at least decent if there's not anything on it or I change my mind. And from there, we're going to go ahead and start our glue up. I'm going to use Type-On 2 for this one because it's quick dry time. Just want to even bead. You don't want to go too crazy. It's just going to droop all out when you squeeze the panel together, so no need to make a bigger mess than necessary. But you do want to make sure you get even coverage down each edge of the board. Just going to give you a stronger bond in the end. And then from there, just lay everything down, get everything lined up. And when you put your clamps on, you want to do top and bottom. You don't want to put all your clamps onto one side. That's going to cause your panel to warp, and you're going to have a big bowed panel that you're not going to be able to do anything with, and it's going to be a huge pain to correct later on. So just keep that in mind when you're getting everything set up. From there, I just like to take a straight edge. Make sure I didn't crank clamps down too hard. Everything's lined up nice. Once I'm happy with that, I'm going to go ahead, take a paper towel, just wipe up some of that squeeze out. It'll still be on there. It's not a big deal, but it'll make it easier when you have to go back and sand. You're not having to sand off so much glue. So it just speeds up that process. And while the panel's drying, we're going to go ahead and start working on the legs. I'm using a miter gauge on the table saw to get a nice 90-degree face. You can do this on a miter saw. I just don't use one in my shop, and I find great results with the miter gauge. Again, if you have a miter saw, use what's available to you. Don't worry about using a table saw or anything like that. Now that the ends are all squared up, I can use a stop block on the miter gauge and cut all 3 legs out. And this wouldn't be a YouTube woodworking video if I didn't just stack all the parts you just saw me cut. Now I'm going to put a splay on these legs. I'm setting the miter gauge to 5 degrees for no other reason than it seemed like a good amount of degrees. Now we just go ahead and cut those 5 degrees in the bottom of all the legs. Now my camera died and I didn't realize when I was cutting the other end. But once you cut 5 degrees on one end, you do need to set the miter gauge 5 degrees the other direction, so that way it sits flat on both the panel and on the ground. With our legs all cut out, now it's time to focus our attention on the top. I'm using a circle cutting jig on my bandsaw to cut this out. If you don't have a bandsaw, don't worry, there's a lot of good alternative methods for cutting out circles. A lot of companies will make router circle cutting jigs. You can make one yourself, or you can even just use a jigsaw and cut up to your line and clean it up with a sander. I didn't have a bandsaw in my shop until very recently, and I never let it hold me back before. That's the fun part about woodworking. There's normally another way to do something, so don't get super set on having to have a specific tool. I accidentally started turning my jig a little too soon, so my circle was a little bit off, so I just reset, took another pass. It'll be about an 1/8 inch smaller, but again, I made this oversized, so no big deal. With everything cut out, now it's time to start hooking it all together. I'm going to use dominoes for this one. I used dowels for a very long time before I got my domino. They work just as well. They just take a little bit longer, and I was trying to get this project taken care of on a Sunday afternoon. You can also just send screws to the top, since the planter is going to be sitting on top, or you can use a pocket hole and just plug that hole and cover it up. Like I said, I'm just using the domino because it's what I have, and it helps me speed things along when I'm trying to get some projects knocked out. And with that, I'm just making the corresponding cuts on the underside of my circle, just a quick bing, bang, boom. Now that all our joinery is cut, it's time to go ahead and add our edge profiles. I'm using a 3/8 round over bit on this one, just what I had on hand, didn't feel like running to the store since this project was all out of scrap wood. But just hitting every corner, taking my time with all of that, and then I'll hit the top 2. This is totally optional. You don't have to add an edge profile, or you can add a chamfer, you can add all different kinds of stuff. I just thought a round over would complement it nice since it is a round table. With that all taken care of, just want to double check, make sure I'm happy with everything. And again, this wouldn't be a YouTube woodworking video if I didn't sit here and complain about sanding. But small projects like this always go super quick. It's really when you get those big projects where you spend hours and hours sanding that you really get tired of it. But stuff like this took all of 15 minutes, started at 120 grit, went to 180, and then finished at 220. With everything else taken care of, now it's just time to glue the legs on. I'm using Type-On quick and thick because I'm trying to get all this done in one day, and I want to get finished put on too after dinner. So just popping the dominoes in there, I'm going to put a little bit on the legs. This isn't the strongest glue. The Type Bond 2 would be better if you're going to be putting a heavier plant or anything with real soil in it. I'm putting a fake plant, and the whole planter itself weighs maybe 3-4 pounds tops, so I'm not worried about it being super strong. Now I'm just throwing everything in clamps. Again, just like the panel, you don't want to go super crazy and cause everything to bow. I'm just putting enough pressure so everything seats flush and the legs all sit level. After dinner, it came back out. The stool was totally dry, and it's time to start putting finish on. I'm using Rubio Monocoat's Mud Light. It's what I had on hand. I really like the way it looks on oak. It gives it kind of a warm feeling. But you can use whatever finish you'd like, or you can even paint it if you wanted. Trick with that stuff is rub it in with a Scotch-Brite pad, and then after 15-20 minutes, you really want to buff it off with a paper towel as best you can until that paper towel comes out clean. And that's it. And I'm just going to set it up on these blocks and let the finish dry. That's going to be it for this one. Super fun little weekend project. If you guys like what you saw, please subscribe, comment, like. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one.